Welcome to Revolution Radio. Today it's just me. We wanted to talk about this. Our schedules didn't really match up, so I decided to hop on here and discuss the Fauci email leaks that it came out the night that we recorded our last show, and it was later on that night. I was talking to Scott, and I was sending him all these screen grabs that I was getting from Twitter. I'm like, can you believe what we're finding? This is a watershed moment. All of these emails have been leaked. And turns out that this actually was a BuzzFeed piece, also from the Washington Post. And so it was legit and it was something that was going to be up for a while. But I still believe that it was a watershed moment, without a doubt. And yesterday we waited all day. Okay, we want some clarification. We all have 2 to 3 jobs. We don't really have any personnel to verify anything. And so we waited for mainstream media, for other companies, corporations to kind of pick up and run with this. There to be, I don't know, Jen Psaki to talk about it, somebody to at least acknowledge these emails. And it was little to no coverage at all. And then yesterday evening, we heard more and more to the tone of thank you, Dr. Fauci. Oh, this just shows how much hard work he's put in. And, for me, a breaking point is when somebody says, don't trust your eyes and ears. When we went to the Donald Trump rally in Kansas City to cover that, I remember him saying to the crowd, you're going to see a lot of things about me. You're going to hear a lot of things about me. But don't trust your eyes and ears. Trust me. And at that moment, I was pretty much on board with um, not following that path. And I have been, I've jumped off the mainstream media bandwagon a long, long time ago, and I know who they are. But I figure you don't just say that. You don't just openly say, don't trust your own judgment. Don't trust yourself. Only trust me. But that's exactly what CNN did earlier today, um, when they finally got around to talking about Dr. Fauci or Phony Tony's emails being leaked. Um, they said people are reading these and they're misunderstanding these emails. Excuse me, CNN? What, you don't think that we know how to think for ourselves? That we can't read? We can't listen? That these senses that have got us through life, that have made us who we are, they're flawed. They don't work. We are so dumb we need CNN to tell it. That's what they think. That's what they think. They think that'll work. And by the way, for a lot of neoliberals, it does work. They do fall into that trap. Well, it's Trump versus Fauci, and I'm blindly going to sacrifice at the altar for Dr. Fauci. And again, I'm not surprised. I've seen this over and over, but I really thought there would have been at least, outside of the Washington Post, which I will give them credit for running the story. Give them all the credit in the world for doing that. But no major, no real major mainstream media has picked it up. Tucker Carlson talked about it for like 8 minutes, and I was really shocked by that. I figured he would pull a Rachel Maddow and do, well, like, I don't know, a year on this topic, like she did with Russiagate. The only difference being this is real. Russiagate didn't happen. It wasn't, it was completely made up BS. This, we have substantial evidence that this is credible. One person to back that up is Dr. Fauci himself, who says, yeah, these are his emails. Everything's legit. And yeah, so we definitely wanted to talk about it and to break it down. Like I said, schedules didn't really match. We have other shows that we work on, other jobs and everything else, but I didn't want it to go too far before we were able to talk about this. And when I'm looking into CNN, they did a puff piece interview of Fauci, and old phony Tony, he, outside of saying the general public is just, they're confused. They're not understanding what his email said, um, in a way to just pander to the lowest common denominator. And so, yeah, don't worry about what those words say. Don't use your cognitive ability. Just trust what I'm saying, and saying you're reading it wrong. But that's basically what he said. Let me get into a little bit here of this piece from the interview. Um, In one email sent to Dr. Fauci last April, an executive at EcoHealth Alliance, the global nonprofit that helped fund some of the research at China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, thanked Fauci for publicly stating that the scientific evidence supports a natural origin for the coronavirus and not a lab release. Now think about that. That's what in the email, that's what it said. Hey, and this coming from a company who directly funds gain of function research, that directly funds the synthetic creation of coronavirus. They sent him an email early last year, and they thanked him. Hey, thanks for not throwing us out. Thanks for letting us get away with this, essentially. Thanks for not pointing the finger to us, even though uh, you can. History shows that gain of function research has been done multiple times over and has a high probability of leaking out of the lab. Not for nefarious reasons, not as the bioweapon, belief, but because, well, you're working with a very contagious created virus amongst people who can can catch that virus. It- Containing a virus is incredibly difficult, and especially when you're the one or your team is the one who's making it, and you're doing this day in, day out, sometimes 12 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. Things are going to happen over time. And that's exactly what it looks like happened. And before we had a conclusive idea of what was it, organic or was it a lab leak, Dr. Fauci is already out there in the press in April 2020 telling, no, 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 it's not. It comes from nature. It didn't come from a lab. And so this company, Echo Health Alliance, they sent him an email. Hey, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you not throwing us under the bus. And so he was questioned about that. And John Berman of CNN asked him and said, there are some of your critics who say that this shows you have a cozy relationship with the people who are behind the Wuhan lab research. Uh, what would you say to that? And Dr. Fauci, 2 words, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. This is his response. He paused and then says, I don't even see how they get that from the email. What? That's your response? It's nonsense? You don't understand how people would connect those 2 dots from that email. We are saying we think you have too close of ties with the companies who fund this kind of research, and they directly thanked you for doing them a public service while lying to the American people. And you don't see where we believe that there's uh, too you're too close, really related with these people. You don't get that. I question what kind of doctrine Dr. Fauci, phony Tony, actually has. Um, he goes on to say, um, the email was just sent to him, and he noted the origins of coronavirus are still uncertain. Of course, he's saying that now, even though, and again, I'm not a Trump supporter, but even though when Trump was saying that, it was crazy conspiracy theory. We won't even touch that with the 10-foot pole. No way that's possible. But now that we're finding out more information, now that the WHO and China has been forced to be more transparent, now all these, Dr. Fauci and some other scientists who said this didn't happen are now starting to, well, we don't know, maybe it could be a lab leak. They're trying to get back on that fence, that neutral fence. Uh, but Fauci did go on to say, I have always said and will say today to you, John, that I believe that most likely the origin of it is from an animal species, but I keep an absolutely open mind. There may be another origin, like a lab leak for the coronavirus. Again, and this is just one part. There was so many emails to break down and so many to look at. I think the fact that he's having these conversations, and this was April of last year, it shows what he knew, what he didn't know. It seems to be like he knew a lot. The other thing that it did talk about was he downplayed the masks to a colleague. And I don't even know if that's true, to be honest. Reading it, and what I mean by that is I don't know if he actually downplayed the masks. What he said, when advising a colleague who was traveling, he said, um, the masks will protect the uninfected people if the infected person is wearing a mask. He then went on to say that like the cheap masks that that people are buying weren't working. Um, Again, I don't know how true that is, in the fact that I think that was the assumption we all had, and that's why everyone wore a mask because no one knew who had coronavirus and who didn't. You didn't know if you were infected or not, and by the time that you showed symptoms, you were already contagious. I think this one is a small. I know there's so many people who want to jump on this, and this is the big thing they want to talk about. But I'm telling you, they're gonna give that one up. That's the red meat that they're throwing out there, because they don't want you to pay attention to this other stuff. They really, really don't want you to pay attention to this other stuff. Gain of function research, by the way, was banned. Dr. Fauci is where he makes a ton of his network and ton of his money is through gain of function research. That's like his baby. So he's going to throw you this mask one. And so is everyone else, especially now the masks are basically going away. There's the people who are, no matter how open-minded they are, they're already dead set on masks work or masks don't work. I don't really think there was that much in the email about the masks. I know he did double down on the fact that, well, if you wear a mask, it protects you too. I'm sure it does to an extent. Like, ultimately, I'm sure it does to an extent. The other thing is, we knew the N95 masks were the mask of choice. They were just hard to get. But I wouldn't fall for that one too much, because the other thing is what I was seeing is in one of those emails was the actual recipe for COVID-19. And I don't know if I speak about it enough, but my wife is an actual chemist. She is a biochemist. And I showed it to her and I said, what is that? Like, all it was, if you haven't seen it, and I wish I could bring it up, I can try to bring up a picture, but it's really blurry. But there it is, yeah. So what that is essentially parts of the recipe that created the coronavirus. And, if you look, this is March 11th, 2020. Um, is in my mind, if you are Rand Paul and you're getting ready to question Dr. Fauci again, you point directly to this and you say, "You're telling me no gain of function? You under oath said that you did not fund gain of function research. Well, how come? How come you have the recipe? You Somebody you funded had to have created that recipe. Not to mention Dr. Baker. There is interactions with a Dr. Baker. If you recognize that name, that's because in that inquiry between Rand Paul and many of the other senators to Dr. Fauci, Dr. Baker was brought up, and it looked like because Rand Paul had pointed out the fact that Dr. Baker was doing gain of function research, and Dr. Fauci said, I know what it looks like, I know what they're saying on Twitter, but that's not true. Well, actually, in the emails, and one of them that's come up, I don't have that one available at the moment, apologize, but there is them specifically talking about gain of function research. So what? I mean, honestly, I'm I'm a populist left. Okay, that's where I'm at. But I'm principled as well. And not only do I know for certain that if this was a working class American who lied under oath and who was caught lying under oath, they would be arrested already. I 100% expect Dr. Fauci, oh, Phony Tony, to walk away as a hero. And part of it is the mainstream media is not going to talk about this. The mainstream media is going to downplay most of this. And honestly, I'm shocked by the fact that there's so many conservative media outlets who aren't talking about it the way they should. There's not enough of a stink rising dealing with this situation because we have the information right here. For one, this explains this email right here directly on screen. That explains why they were able to get the vaccine out so quick. When you know the recipe, it's really easy to make the pie. You know, I probably should have used a different analogy because making a pie is actually really hard. Well, at least it is for me. But I'm just saying, if you know what goes into the equation, then solving the problem is pretty easy. And that explains why they were able to supertrack this, why they were able to come up with the vaccine so quickly. This is bigger than the neo-libs and mainstream media is going to let on. I do fear that it's not as big as some people were hoping it to be. But there's no mistake in the fact that it is a watershed moment that will probably be swept away without much of an acknowledgement of what this actually is. And I think a lot of people are, and a lot of outlets, even independent media, some of the places that I follow, they haven't touched the story yet. I think they're too afraid to say something wrong. And part of it is we rarely have all this information put out in front of us without there being much of a gray zone. And it's hard to know how to react. What side of it do you play? How deep do you go in on it? And I think that that's probably the thing where trusted media outlets, especially the independent ones, they really should be covering this a little bit more with a little more transparency and a little more common sense. Because that's why we go to independent media. That's why we trust some of those people. And I really haven't seen a lot of it covered, not in an intelligent manner anyway. But yeah, again, we're still working through this. I'm sure that on the main show, um, should come out this weekend, that we're gonna really do a deeper dive than just covering a couple of these emails. But I thought these were the big ones. I definitely wanted to take the time to really just jump down CNN's throat for this subpar coverage, and really only talking about two emails. I, Honestly, I'm a little surprised that they even covered the one with the exchange between Dr. Fauci and EcoHealth Alliance, because that one is actually a fairly good email to bring up and question him about. But then the other one, the mask one, it's a softball. When you're looking at all of these emails, that one's a pretty, yeah, that's it's kind of like a really high changeup. It's really easy to hit that ball. Um, and the ones that I, just wanted to bring up the most as quickly as possible was definitely the recipe for COVID. I think that that's huge. I think that 100% proves that not only did they fund gain of function research, they knew gain of function, they created it. I don't know how Fauci could lie under oath about not funding this when you have it in your email. I mean, it, it's ridiculous. But then to take it a step further, and you have an email with Dr. Baker conferring gain of function research, specifically calling it gain of function research, and then lying under oath. And at the end of the day, what are we going to see around DC? What are we going to see on mainstream media? What are we going to see in the the yards of the neoliberals? Thank you, Dr. Fauci. Thank you, Dr. Fauci. You effectively released this fucking virus upon our world. And honestly, if you would have stepped up, been honest with the American people, with no, I take that back. With the world, we would have been able to contain it. We would have known what it was. It wouldn't have been so unsettling. It wouldn't have completely thrown this world through a 180. But he didn't. He lied and somehow ends up being the hero of it. It's repugnant. And again, like I said, we'll talk about it more when I'm here with Scott, and maybe some of the other guys are going to step in as well. But anyway, just wanted to talk about that for a little bit. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate you. You have a good one.